The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's a Short Time Wrestling podcast. This time we are recording, I believe, episode 625, because again, the feed might have over it's approaching 700 shows, but in terms of this interview format, 625 of these bad boys have been coming your way. I am your host, Jason Bryant. I've done a lot of things as far as microphones go. Like I announced, I do podcasts. I also do pretty decent things with the pen and the history book, but that notwithstanding, this is a show that's talking about wrestling, and if this is your first time checking us out, thank you. Today, my guest is Brian Reinhardt. He is the Sports Information Director at North Carolina State University. This one coming from International Podcast Day. He is the reigning, defending, whatever the Paul Heyman line is, Sports Information Director of the Year at the Division I level from the National Wrestling Media Association. Brian is going to talk about how much the Pack Mentality Poppins podcast, if I can say that properly, a plentiful amount of times about popping all the plosives into P's in this podcasting microphone. Wow, yeah. If you are averse to plosive, you just hated that last sentence. If you're a podcast nerd, you might actually love that last sentence. But Brian has been the host of the Pack Mentality Poppins podcast since its inception. Year 3 has come and gone, or actually it's the 3rd year anniversary has come and gone. And he's going to talk about the impact of the podcast on the wrestling program, what the school thinks of it, and how he's kind of setting NC State wrestling apart from other sports within the program. A couple things I want to touch on before we get to Brian's interview. And the first, the Super 32. Couldn't do it in North Carolina this year, so let's cross the border. Let's go to the beach. Let's go to Myrtle Beach. Dave Barker and Sarah Koenig have done it again. They put on what I saw, from what I could tell, was a tremendous event. I didn't spend a whole lot of time watching it. I know I did tune in for some of the key rounds. And, as far as with it being a weekend and having my own kids, it's, I think I redid a closet. I rehung some closet stuff this weekend. So yeah, there was that. So I couldn't exactly stay dialed into the Super 32 all weekend, but Dave and Sarah are great people. They've been on the show before. I haven't had them the last 2 years prior to the Super 32 because there's been just so much going on. But I want to give them a shout out for all the work that they've done for the sport of wrestling, not just nationwide, but let's dial it down to what they've done in the state of North Carolina to put that state on the map, and then sharing the wealth a little bit. Myrtle Beach was open to hosting it when Greensboro said no. So Dave and Sarah, tip of the cap. Great job, as always. I'm sure we'll be talking about, the Facebook groups are already talking about some of the things that went on down there, and that's things, of course, that are out of your control. Also upcoming this week, we have the preseason nationals, the Brian Keck Memorial Preseason Nationals. I'll touch on that in a minute. The Hawkeye Wrestling Club Showdown open November 1st. That is a Sunday at Extreme Arena in Coralville, Iowa. That is, of course, the city that abuts Iowa City. That is the same facility that USA Wrestling hosted the Senior Nationals a couple weeks ago. I get to drive 5 hours again, and I get to announce in that wonderful new facility. So I'll be on the mic there. The undercard has been released, and that will be streamed live on Track Wrestling for free. So the undercard, do not have the list in front of me at this time. By the time you listen to this show, you will probably be able to find it. I will probably be able to find it. I just saw that there were some tweets from the Inner Circle and the Hawkeye Club about the undercard matches that have been added. Main card was about 9, so now we've got a nice 17 match card if you include the undercard and the main event. Of course, the main event streamed live on Track Wrestling, I believe, for a $29.95 price tag, and that is pretty much serving as a fundraiser for the Hawkeye Club. So if you think about that and you're looking at Rockfin and you're looking at Flow and be like, well, why at Fight or at Fight Pass, and be like, well, that's a lot much more. Well, the thing is, again, with Track Wrestling, the event host sets the price point on these, just like we at the Virginia Duels, which is my wrestling club, we set a price point for the tournament. It's this amount. So that is set by the Hawkeye Club. That is not set by Track Wrestling, just so you know. I don't want to beat you up with calls to action, but one thing I do want to tell you is that if you are a Rockfin subscriber at Mat Talk Online, but rockfin.com/Mat Talk Online, or you are a patron, a team member at mattalkonline.com/join the team, you are going to get a free video interview right now before it's released in the Short Time podcast feed with Pat Hogan. He is the co-author of Wrestling the Alphabet. You may have seen a couple other interviews floating around the web on different platforms, but I talked with Pat this morning. That's Monday morning, October 26th, and we went deep into his wrestling career, New Jersey state champion, and some of the names that he graduated with and won state titles with in New Jersey back in 06 was impressive. We talk a lot about wrestling, of course, a lot about the book too. So if you want to watch that now, you can get it through the Patreon and Rockfin platforms at mattalkonline.com/join the team or rokfin.com/mattalkonline. That was streamed live. So if you happen to be around and you get the Rockfin live, you get the unedited raw interview. So that's how we started. You get the little front end. I'm like, are we live? Yep, that's what we do. Now, coming back to the preseason nationals, and this is an event I announced for the last several years because the late Brian Keck was a very good friend of mine. Were we besties? No, but Brian and I were roommates in Fargo. He had this ability to just put a smile on your face wherever he was at. I remember one of the first times I met him, probably 16 years ago. I'm coming into the Wallstein Center at Cleveland State to help. I was freelancing for the NWCA at the time. I wasn't even employed full-time yet. And I'm moving some mats or clock. And next thing you know, here comes a snowball flying through, just pelts me right on the back of the neck because it was snowing. It was Cleveland in January. It happens. And from there on out, I remember talking to him about his RPW, Real Pro Wrestling bio that I wrote for the website way back in the day. Yeah, Real Pro Wrestling reference. Brian Keck spent time in Ohio Valley Wrestling, in professional wrestling, with some of his signature moves, the Keck Missile. And I remember rooming with him in Fargo one year. And other than him taking like creepy pictures of me when I was asleep, he's like, "Hey, JB, check it out. Check out what you look like when you sleep." I'm like, Keck, dude, that's freaky, man. That's freaky. But we were joking about what was it like to be in professional wrestling school. And he goes, it was funny because he gave me a perspective about, we're so used to things being faster in collegiate wrestling. And he said he had to slow down a lot of things. And that really kind of surprised me, even though you see the high energy and things of that nature on the world of World Wrestling Entertainment or AEW or your old school stuff on the WWE network. And Brian gave a really good insight. And one time, let me tell a couple quick stories out here about just the belly laugh of Brian Keck. So Chumley's, which was a bar in Moorhead, Minnesota, and prior to North Dakota opening keeping last call. Well, let me start over. North Dakota's last call was like 12:45 because the bars used to close at 1. Well, across the river in Moorhead, the bars were at 2. So in that early 2000s, before North Dakota went to 2, there would be this last call, and then we'd everybody, whoever had vehicle, just people would pile in the cars. I'm not going to say it's a responsible thing to do by any stretch of the imagination. We'd all find a way to get over to Moorhead, and it was usually Coach's or Chumley's. And Chumley's was the place that you felt like you were going to get stabbed when you go in there. I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it's an exaggeration, but there was you'd see a lot of familiar faces over there right at last call, and then at the time, I was doing a lot of karaoke in college, and the song that I was pretty much defined my singleness as a single college male. I sang Chocolate Salty Balls from South Park, and if you know the song, I won't sing the chorus for you here, but if you've never heard of it, just Google it, and you will try to picture a 290, 300-pound pretty much unkempt college kid singing this song in the chorus. And then so I pay the DJ, like they're doing karaoke. He's like, we're done. I was like, dude, I'll give you $10 if I can play. He goes, yeah. So I get up there and I'm on, this is a stage here. So there's like a dance floor and people, and I get up there and I start belting out Chocolate Salty Balls. And I remember coming off the stage and Nick Simmons and Brian Keck are both doubled over. They're on. I mean, I would say they would be on the floor, but you might catch something if you were on the floor here. But Keck is he's uncontrollably laughing, and it was just it's one of those like you had to be there things. But it was one of those things. Just the guy loved to have a good time. He loved to laugh it up with his friends, and he was really, really great as a tournament director to me because he knew that I've got the NCAA championships. I've done the Olympics, and this is not a selfie humble brag here, but he wanted me to come into his tournament and just give it that little oomph. And the preseason nationals, they started at the barn, and then they've grown into this monstrosity. But Brian always had me involved. And the one year I couldn't do it, I felt bad because It was the World Championships. He goes, man, you're going to big time me for the World Championships? And I go, well, yeah. And, he was obviously joking. But what Brian did as a tournament director is he paid the PA announcer the rate that you feel like you wanted to come work for Brian. You wanted to come work his event. It wasn't so uptight. I mean, you could be low key. You could play music. I kind of poke fun at him when he was a diehard Cleveland sports fan, which is pretty much a curse into itself. But when the Indians lost to the Cubs, I played the Go Cubs Go theme, and he just looked at me and goes, man, can you please turn it off? Can you please turn it off? So, I mean, he took all the ribbing in a good-hearted way. And just, again, to tell you the type of guy he was, is last year, the last time I saw him was at the Hy-Vee Hall in Des Moines, where preseason nationals were kicking off, and Carrie Underwood was going to perform the next day or that night. I can't remember. It was either Friday or Saturday night at the Wells Fargo Arena right next door, where they had the 2013 NCAA championships. And Keck got us tickets. He got a bunch of the staff tickets to Carrie Underwood. And I don't know if I would have gone to the show on my own volition, or I would have bought a ticket rather. But I sit there and I had an absolute blast. And I would have never gone to that show if it wasn't for Brian Keck taking care of his people and being just a stand-up guy. It still does kind of creep me out that he was taking pictures of me when I was asleep that one year in Fargo. We were roommates. But ultimately, Keck was just a larger-than-life figure. And coming up on where we lost him about a year, he was mysteriously passed away in Mexico shortly after the preseason nationals. We're still haven't heard anything new about what happened there. And that's something that's going to eat at me for a while, not knowing. But Brian, I got to throw this one last story out, because it's not speaking ill of the dead in any stretch of the imagination, but we're 2015 World Championships, and this is the year, I'm announcing it, and I really, you go to these events, and I don't get to really let loose at all until kind of towards the end of the event when I don't have to work, because the last thing you want to do is you're not showing up hungover. Well, Brian had a suite up at the top of the hotel where we were having the Orleans Arena, wherever the hotel that was connected to it. And he had Eric Alberison, who is Henry Cejudo's wrestling coach, basically send out passwords to people via text message or instant message or Facebook Messenger. And I get one, and I walk in and I knock on the door, and finally we're done. Me and Hazard and Ken Berger had done our research, so we're like, all right, we'll go up. I'll go up, have a couple beers, and then we'll call it a night early, which is something hard to do in Vegas. So we go up. Well, I go up, and then Alberison opens the door, and there's some old school, Henry's in there, and some of the old women's trailblazers. And I don't want to say old, but like the trailblazers of the women's wrestlers that came through slightly before me. The Grace Magnusons were up there, and there were some boxing fighters, other UFC fighters up there. It was just like, I'm not name dropping because I can't remember all their names, but I'm like, where's Keck? Well, apparently Keck had a lot of fun earlier, and Grace goes, follow me. And there's this giant, this closet in this hotel room is bigger than many hotel rooms. It was bigger than most of the Motel 6s entirely that I'd ever stayed in. And I open the door, and there's Keck. He's just passed out on the floor of this closet. And I'm like, how long has he been like that? It's like about an hour. It's like, yeah, he was having a good time. So I don't know. I had to come back and actually edit this. I came back. I was about to process the show, and I was like, you know what? I can't leave the story on Keck passed out in the closet. I just can't. I can't leave that, because I was sitting there racking my brain. I didn't have to rack my brain very hard. I was like, wait a minute, I forgot. I should have mentioned that. So one year, I want to, I don't even know. Last time it was NCAAs were in Oklahoma City, and I see Keck outside in the morning, the Sunday after everything. So I was like, hey, JB, I'm going to go to a casino in a little bit. You want to roll with? I'm like, yeah. So we end up getting in the car, driving about 30 minutes to a casino, and having a good time. I lost some money. I got a bad beat on a poker table. Joe Heskett was over there. He even said afterwards, he goes, dude, that was a bad beat. So, I mean, between Fargo, casinos, Carrie Underwood concerts, snowballs in the face, real pro wrestling bios, there's just a lot of stories that I like to tell about the guy, and hopefully this just scratches the surface about what type of guy Brian Keck was. When we talk about preseason nationals, it's just, he was such a good dude. if you see Keck and you didn't know him, you'd see this giant guy with no neck, physically imposing, had the goatee. I mean, he just looked like he was a mean guy, but he was absolutely not. And salt of the earth, just he's somebody that wrestling is truly dearly going to miss. And in lieu of any fact bomb, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to just tell you a fact bomb that Brian Keck was truly one of the best people I knew in wrestling. And preseason nationals are named in his honor. I'm unfortunately will not be there this year because I worked that for Brian, and that was what I did. And he went above and beyond to treat me like I felt like was not just a business partnership, but a friendship. I mean, it's just the type of person he is. And I'm rambling on about how good of a guy he was because that's what you do. You talk about good people. And we don't talk enough about Brian Keck, but let his memory live on with the Brian Keck preseason nationals. That's what I've got today. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me because you've always got time for short time. Now we'll meet another good Brian. This is Brian Reinhardt, the sports information director. He's got a bigger title than that. I'll let him tell you that here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. I was going to say it was my fault, not your fault. And I sit there, I get up, I do the changeover, I mute the mic because I don't know what you're going to hear in the background. I've got my intro set up, and I'm like, yeah, these are called podcaster problems because no matter what, I've done this twice today, and no matter what, we're going to have those issues. So you're going to have a show where you forget to press record, or you don't hit your side, or somebody's been muted. So that is another thing. Even all of us make these mistakes, but what a tough act to follow, these kids. Sam and Jude with the home mat advantage. I mean, you're sorry, dude. You how can you follow that?
It's funny. Whenever I do a podcast, I like to say, let's pull the curtain back, talk to people. I logged in 15 minutes early. I was sitting there watching. I don't know why you put me on after them. You might get 5 minutes out of me for an interview. Those two could have talked for an hour and been a lot more entertaining. So, yeah, big shoes to follow. They did great. They've interviewed some of our guys here at NC State, and they are just really hitting out of the park right now.
Yeah, and from that perspective, being media guys, you're the person they go through to get those interviews, and that's kind of, sometimes people just skirt around the SID or the media professional, and they went right to you.
I was going to say, probably won't call people out, but that is absolutely true. Those two are great. They know all the rules. You help them a lot. Absolutely. They go through me. They've asked me questions. They are doing a great job, and the future is very bright if that's the journalist coming up in this wrestling world.
I'm going to agree with you mightily. Now, you are the host of the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast, which we bring up on the screen here, which is...
Oh, man, look at Pat. He looks sharp there in that
he definitely does not look like that right now because he has gone the howling, I think, on us. He's out there, and this is a show that's on the Matt Talk Podcast Network, but it is produced... Or actually, it's hosted, and everything is done to you. You guys send me the stuff. I put it up together, and it's been one of the two colleges that are still actively on the platform. Of course, Virginia Tech being the other in the ACC. So you've got some competition there, but this one's done by you. You've got we're at 69 episodes, and during the pandemic, content is crucial. So this has been, it's been a labor of love for you, but it's also kind of led the charge at NC State, and just, I guess, talk about the idea of wanting to even start a wrestling podcast and how that all got moving.
Well, I mean, we're looking for content. I'm in the media relations SID world, and we're always just trying to think of different ways to tell the stories of our student athletes. And Pat actually brought up a great idea. He wanted to start it. I obviously reached out to you, a lot of back and forth between me and you. And this is a new platform. Some of these Olympic sports, they don't get the coverage necessarily as the football or men's basketball. So our podcast, our fans get to hear from Pat. Most podcasts, he's not on all of his own podcasts, but the student athletes are the best part. We really get to dive deep into their story, show their different mentalities off the mat. And I think that's what really helps our following for the podcast is they hear these guys not just talking about wrestling, but just talking about their life. And I think it's a fun podcast too. We joke around a lot. I have good relationships, know a lot of them behind the scenes. So that definitely helps. And our podcast isn't the most serious. We like to have fun, goof off. And I'll make fun of Pat just about every episode. So just want to take our fans behind the scenes and get them to know our student athletes.
And of course, the host here, Brian, is the reigning defending undisputed National Wrestling Media Association Division I SID of the year, and you came into wrestling really kind of blind. I mean, Bruce Winkworth was an SID before. I actually met him way long time ago. I was doing an Old Dominion baseball game, and he was sitting next to me, and then years later, I'm into wrestling, but you're the guy from the NC State ODU baseball game. It was just, that guy was an institution there, but you didn't come in. Things are changing over with NC State wrestling. They've seen better days, and now they've had really good days. What was this wrestling journey been like for you to see as basically somebody that didn't know much about the sport now hosting a podcast about wrestling?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if I should admit this. I knew nothing about the sport. I did not wrestle as a kid. I was a soccer player, played year-round soccer. Grew up in Pittsburgh, so wrestling was huge. I knew all about, and I still know all about pro wrestling, but the college wrestling, not so much. So it was a little bit of a shock. Pat got hired maybe 2012, I believe, and they asked if I would jump over and be the SID for wrestling. And I had a lot to learn in that off season. I owe a lot to Pat, owe a lot to Frank Beasley. They were the ones I reached out to the most, and I've had fun learning. I'm still learning. Folk style college, I'm decent at. Freestyle, man, there's something new every day with that one, but it's been fun.
Not as much as there used to be. There's more. There's actually more rule changes in folk style wrestling in the Federation, high school, and college than there are international wrestling. We could have never said that before 2013.
Yeah, it's been a great journey. I mean, it's fun. I love soccer, but wrestling's my favorite sport to watch now. I subscribe. I watch so many duels. My wife will see me on the couch just watching random duels at night. So I'm a fan. So I love talking about it now. And yeah, wrestling's a fun sport. Once you get to know what's going on with it, once you understand.
How much soccer are you watching these days, though?
An awful lot of soccer.
Awful lot, okay.
I love my EPL soccer. Nothing beats a Saturday, Sunday morning watching English soccer games. So I'm still a big soccer fan. Don't get to play it anymore, but, a little old, a little retired. I'm up there in the years.
Yeah, I'm not as proficient in the footy as probably some people. I mean, I've been to Borussia Dortmund Stadium.
Okay.
The European Junior Championships were there a couple years ago, and it was they were renovating, so the seats were out, but we could still walk through it, and they got us to walk through the tunnel and the. I think I might have ripped off the song of their intro somewhere off of YouTube. I haven't used it yet for anything, but it was just one of those things you get to walk out underneath, and then you're hearing well, now we're used to fake crowd noise. Then it was it was like, what? So, I mean, just, I got some BVB stuff for the kids, and now they've grown out of it. So that's about basically the extent of the soccer, other than my next door neighbor now plays women's soccer at Upper Iowa. So that's about it. But when we get back to wrestling, enough about my neighbors and my kids, because you follow me on Instagram for that stuff. But when the idea comes with the podcast, I'd pitched it to several schools that I was close to. And, that first call was one call, and then months later go by. And how do you kind of sell this to your athletic department? Because a lot of, schools, if they're going to do something content wise, it's in-house, and they're probably going to do it the most inexpensive way possible. So even though it's a Power 5, and granted, money being what it is in our era of COVID, how do you sell this to your administration? Like, we're going to do this, and here's why we're going to do it.
From the school perspective, it was a process. We started, me and Pat, talking about a podcast probably over a year before we actually did our first episode. October 9th, we launched. So 3 years ago, our little anniversaries. But, that is something. The best selling point was it was content that is not out there for college wrestling. As you said, we were one of the first, and still, there's only about a handful or so that are doing wrestling podcasts. And here at NC State, the team was getting better and better every year. You could see that. And this has been a great avenue to have our fans reach out to the team, have them listen to what's going on behind the scenes. And I think the success of the team has definitely helped pitch this idea, and our following has helped. I can't tell you how many times at a duel people come up to us, "Hey, you're that dude with the podcast," or "I know that voice from somewhere." So our following's helped too. I think the administration here has seen how the podcast has taken off and how people enjoy it. And it's kind of original content that we take a lot of pride in right now.
And how have the other sports kind of responded? Because it's one thing you sell the point that you were the first podcast at NC State Athletics, and now other sports got to be looking around and going, "Wait a minute, that's really cool. Can you do one for us?"
That probably would be a good Pat Popolizio question. He has told me multiple coaches have asked him about it and approached him about it. So there might be a little jealousy out there, but a lot of our different contacts here in comms have a lot of different ways to get content out for their teams. And a lot of these coaches are happy with that. And I just think for some reason, the wrestling podcast works for wrestling very well. Wrestling fans, they're nuts sometimes. They will devour any content you put out. And this podcast is definitely proof of that.
Two guests that you've had on that have been the most intriguing to me kind of cross over out of the wrestling world. One is the guys from Lizard Lick Towing, and then the other is Sergeant Slaughter, one of which you were marking out, fanboying like crazy. I would have too.
I'm a fanboy for WWE guys. So Sergeant Slaughter was my get, so I was happy.
Puke. I mean, I just remember him beating up Cobra in that 3-part G.I. Joe animated series, and then missing out on him and Hulk Hogan in the store, and then I had to settle for Corporal Kirchner, which was just depressing. But I mean, why the reach out to get those two guys on the show?
For me personally, I'm a WWE fan lifelong, and I just wanted a WWE Hall of Famer. We had a connection, as you know, the great Jerry Briscoe hooked that one up. We've known Jerry, obviously, with the Oklahoma State ties, and Jerry was actually on the podcast. So I've texted him a few times about some different things, and he said, hey, Sarge is in North Carolina. He knows about your program. He'd be more than happy to do it. And I was like, wow, we're in. So unfortunately, didn't get to do that one in person. Had to do that one over Skype, but Sarge was great. Like I said, the maybe 8-9-year-old WWE fan really marked out in that. And I think on my Twitter, it's still my pinned tweet of that interview. So
I think I mentioned earlier on the day that when Rowdy Roddy Piper replied to my tweet, which I was actually a picture of me with Jerry Briscoe and Bobby Douglas in Vegas one year, and he like replied to it like quote tweet. I'm like, yeah, I love They Live, and yeah, so I'm down with that one too. And then of course the Lizard Lick, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, local guys, they're NC State fans. I say they're Gwiz fans too, and they just love NC State wrestling. Anytime you can kind of get a little, anytime you get a celebrity on to talk about NC State wrestling, we'll take it. And the pride that some of these celebrities have in wrestling, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. I think that's why I want to reach out, and I look for those blue checks sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes, and they're hard because it took me probably 2 or 3 years to get Mario Lopez on Short Time. I'm still over on Chris Pratt because getting him on Twitter not going to happen. But it's going through his publicist people are just, they're like, no, they're not. They are just, every time he puts a tweet out about wrestling, I will reply to them and be like, hey, it's been a couple months. He just tweeted this. Can we, because Andy got him at the Beat the Streets thing in LA, and that wasn't on the podcast, but I'm just like, dude, I know your high school coach. They used to come to Virginia Duels. Like, can we just talk about wrestling, please? But here's another thing that I like about, and this is kind of a selling point with me on the network when pitching schools. And this, again, pardon the advertisement here, but this is my show, is what Aaron Sweezy is saying. He's been listening all day. Don't listen to many podcasts, but the Pack Mentality podcast is awesome. This is a guy who wrestled Division II at Central Oklahoma, is from Kansas, currently lives in Nebraska and does Concordia NAI, audio and stuff. So there's the crossover appeal that if you're listening to the entire network, you will sometimes get a show and something that surprises you. And that's one thing I like about having all the shows on the network, but you're picking up fans that they're listening to podcasts. Oh, I'm going to listen to this. So that's one thing you guys have also picked up some extra fans on.
I definitely think so. And wrestling, it's if you're a wrestling fan, you're going to reach out and find that stuff. But sometimes the casual wrestling fan or a fan of another school might not look at NC State, but they see it on the network of you guys. And I think that definitely has helped. It has brought a lot more ears to our podcast. And I think, as you say, you might be advertising too, but it's a great relationship we have working with you. I love doing everything here, shipping it off to you, letting you do all the dirty work, and then I get it back, and then I can push it out as well. So I think what we're working on here between NC State and Matt Talk, it works great for us.
Little shade as the Grind from App State. They're going to be a guest later asking if Pack Wrestling has any openings on the schedule this year. Scratch chin emoji.
We were there last year, so they can. I don't know if they're going to bus over this year or not.
I don't know. It depends on where the bubble is in Boone compared to Raleigh. Lot more stuff around Raleigh because you could probably bubble up in Boone pretty good. Although,
I was going to say, me and my wife actually vacationed in Boone this summer, so it wasn't too bad. I liked it.
But when we look at the other shows that are coming through the network, do you sit there and listen to other podcasts, be like, okay, they did this, we need to do this now?
Sometimes I do listen to other podcasts. I listen when people talk about us. I think that just goes back to my SID world, is anytime anybody mentions NC State, you want to hear what they're talking about. But I think a lot of podcasts, you don't want to really copy each other. You just want to roll with what's working for you. Like I said, when I go into formatting or think about what I want to talk about, I'm looking for fun. Selfishly, I talk about stuff that probably entertains me. I have a very dry sense of humor. So if it makes me laugh, I think it will make everybody laugh. I'm not necessarily sure if that works. So that's the way I look at that.
You talked about doing the interview with Sergeant Slaughter, Sarge. Robert Remus, I think is his name officially, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and you had to do it on Skype. And most of your stuff has been in-house. It's in the office. You've got the equipment, the microphones. You and Pat sit down. Of course, when the offices were closed, that was a lot tougher. You got the Skype. But how have you evolved with the technology and kind of branched out on how you can deliver the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast without popping your plosive that much without your pop filter?
Well, you just roll with it. I don't know anything about any of that equipment. You have helped me so much with all this stuff. I think I finally trained Pat a little bit, but to be honest with you, to get him to pay attention sometimes, that's tough while we're podcasting, but we have fun. The Skype, it's our favorite toy. $2.99 investment. Skype works perfect. I like interviews in person a lot better, but the Skype machine, you can't beat that. And I think you make fun of me every time I put that in my notes to send you.
It's up there. If I hear Skype machine, I'm going to throw it in there because I like to make fun of Pat on his technological shortcomings as well. Because, although right now, I mean, you did something, though, that I have never done, and I'm still mad at you for it, is you had Melissa Simmons on the show, and I never had a chance to get her on before she left and go back to Oklahoma and work with gymnastics.
Not only was she a guest, but she was a guest host. Now, I think she will admit the guest host might not have gone over as well, but they were in Italy. I think there might have been some adult beverages in the room. John Smith was there too. So a lot of pressure on her for that one, but she was even a guest on our podcast. So, and I think she actually introduced me to you to begin with. So yeah, Melissa, we owe her a lot too.
The question is who's making sure that Nick Gwizdowski's meal fund is taken care of now?
Well, I got the bobblehead right behind me. I don't know how well you guys can see it.
I don't have one yet. So back behind the bar here, I've got I got a Gable one. I got a Baumgartner autographed one, and then I got one my wife picked up, she was at Goodwill for something, and found a Goldie Gopher. So sorry, Gopher fans. I've got the Rainbow Foods Goldie Gopher. It's probably 20 years old at this point. But yeah, those are my three bobbleheads. So I don't get that now.
Well, I'm very proud of that one. As people will say, they'll tell you, if I come up with an idea that works, I'm going to brag about it for life. And that was my idea. Very proud of it. My guy Nick actually was just texting with him today about some stuff. I still want him to take me to Tokyo if he makes the Olympics. So still trying to stay on his good side. And the bobblehead, I thought that was a great way to try to, cement my spot on Team Gwiz here.
I mean, it's a sharp looking bobblehead. I mean, his hair has been perfect the last couple of years, right? I mean, it's amazing how much you get done with college wrestling. You have to take care of your appearance now. It's I can make this fluffed and feathered. I mean, Sam Brooks might have the fluffed and feathered mullet, but I mean, Gwiz is really doing a good job there with that hair game.
He's got the hair. We joked.
We can't say the same though. I mean,
well, actually, I just shaved mine.
Mine just is the light. It's here. It's just the light looks bad. That's why I've been wearing hats all day.
Now, see, I went 7 months without a haircut. I got my haircut before ACCs. Just got it cut last week. The wife was begging for a haircut, and yeah, it was looking bad and not grown. But back to Gwiz, first of all, he's my guy. All right, so he's at 125 kilos here. That bobblehead makes him look like 125 pounds. So that was the one joke we had. It wasn't full size, but he was even impressed with how well he looked.
We get to the world of podcasting, and it's something that we've seen different teams do it, different schools do it, and what has been probably, maybe the most beneficial thing for you personally as the host, getting to do this effort with your team?
Probably getting to know the guys. I'm around them. I try to be around them a lot more, but to interview them, you really have to know them. So I think that's been the most fun part to me. Before this, I knew them, but probably not as well. But sitting down for a 30-minute interview, you really get an idea what they are. You can have fun with them, talk about stuff off the mat. Job-wise, I keep going back to content. Not even before COVID, we're just always looking for content, and the podcast is a perfect solution for that. As you said, the summer podcast might be a little down right now. we haven't done that many episodes. I don't know how many times I can ask Pat what's going on. And he goes, I don't know. So, we kind of laid low a little bit this summer, but we'll be picking up here very shortly. And I've enjoyed it. I do not talk this much in real life. This is my fake radio voice. So for me to put my personality out there a little bit and a little bit out of the comfort zone has been fun too.
Yeah, because I have noticed the Western PA drawl and the North Carolina drawl are kind of fighting over one another right now.
It's funny. I got the pop. I'll say pop all the time. I say my Kellers all the time. I even got a little New York draw for some reason when I go like Donnie or something like that. But people now say I have a Southern accent. I don't believe it. I've been down here 20 years, so I guess it's inevitable. But I'm going up to Pittsburgh this week on football, so I'm sure I'll break out more of my Pittsburgh ease, as we call it.
Yeah, that school in Chapel Hill also has an individual that has a Western PA accent combined with the Oklahoma accent and now the Carolina accent. So we will, we're not going to mention them on this portion of the show. The next segment we'll talk about the rest of the ACC. So we're doing that because I'm brand acknowledging here. So
I love the old NC State T-shirt. We're definitely going to have to get you something with the new wolf head logo. So we'll definitely brand you up some, even NC State font. We're doing a great job of branding right now with our administration, and it's helped with wrestling. As you can see, I like it.
Yeah,
so,
I got Tuffy on the side. This is one of the, I can't remember which shirt this was from. I don't think it might have been the national shirts or something, but I know one thing, and this is a shout out to Melissa when talking about when she was there. So when my daughter, Lucy, my older, she's now 8 in the 3rd grade, she's been having a series of medical issues pretty much her entire life. Well, she went in a hospital for a stretch, I want to say a couple years ago. And then when we get back, there's a gift bag from NC State Wrestling with a Tuffy stuffed animal, some stickers, and some shirts. So it's just kind of the attitude that's there with that program. And it's one of those things. It's not just clients. I mean, yeah, you get some draft classes out of the deal, but at the same point, we didn't ask for that. And that was something that NC State Wrestling did for my daughter, and that's something I'm always going to remember. And even though Melissa's not there anymore, it was it kind of showed what the entire department thinks about the people they work with. So I'm grateful for that. As we get back to podcasting, what's next as we go into this season? We don't know what's going on. Like what's happening, Pat? I don't know. We don't know what's going on. So what do you got planned?
We don't know what's going on for college, but luckily, I mean, we're very fortunate here at NC State. We had the RTC. We had the Wolfpack Wrestling Club. We have guys like Wisdowski, Tommy Gant. They're going to Iowa here November 1st. We have senior nationals coming up. We got the Hidley brothers, Rick Reenan, Jacob Camacho. They're all going to senior nationals. We're actually going to get to talk about wrestling here in the next month. So I'm looking forward to that. I ask Pat all the time, when's your schedule coming out? Even in a normal season, he loves not to answer that question. So I have quit asking about our schedule. Our fans keep asking me.
The opposing teams podcast hosts are asking you.
I tell you, there's a lot of people out there that just want to know who are the Wolfpack Wrestling this year.
The peanut vendors are standing up to them, and if I'm down there, that's a little Slapshot reference for anybody that gets that one. But and one thing that I always wait for, Kyle Klingman and Andy Hamilton do this on the mat, and it's more Kyle to Andy, and I guess this is more you to Pat, is just the subtle dig at the beginning of the show. Absolutely. It's just like, how do you build that rapport with the coach to be comfortable enough to be like, we're gonna make fun of each other and we're sending it out for the world to listen to?
I think that one, it's Pat's personality. I don't think he really cares that I make fun of him every time. It's personally great because I love getting my digs in there. Then I'll just keep going really fast. Like I won't even let him reply, and then he just has this little grin on his face when he knows I get him really good. But that's my personality. Like I said, I don't talk this much in real life. This is my fake voice, but I don't know if I could swear on here, so I won't. But I'm like a smart butt in real life. Feel like I'm quick-witted.
Well, you're actually on university time, so I would probably recommend that not be the case.
Actually, I'm here in the office.
When did you guys open back up, though? Because you guys were shut out of the offices for a while.
Yeah,
right?
We were shut out, and we actually moved offices. The comms office, we're actually up here in our football press box now. So luckily, I have my own luxury suite. So it's not bad. It is very nice accommodations up here. When we started football practice back up, that's kind of when I started coming back in the office again. So football is right across the street. Walk over to practice makes it easy. Wrestling is not far away. They were actually practicing right across the street as well. So it was perfect.
Yeah, so it's got to, I mean, obviously with what football is going through right now and what everybody's doing, I mean, how much from maybe an internal perspective can you bring on what it's like to be a staffer and knowing that, okay, only one sport really is getting anything this fall?
It is crazy right now. And just even with the testing, it's not just the student athletes, it's the staff too. I think that's the one thing that I noticed the most. But, we wear our masks everywhere. I've gotten better with that. I might not have been the best. And, before, I think sometimes a lot, you feel like you had to be seen by these coaches, had to be seen at practice. But now I think everybody understands, just with this disease out there, do your job. If you want to go and be around, absolutely. But don't feel like you just have to show up. So I think we're working a lot. As you know, we're trying to produce content, and doing that without sports is extremely hard in the SID world.
And speaking of the SID world, what's one tip you can give to maybe other media people out there that if you want to get those interviews and be in good graces with the SIDs and not show up on the Things That Annoy SIDs Facebook group, what should they do?
I personally, and I think it's a good team rule. Because we want to protect our guys. I do appreciate it when media reaches out to me to go to our guys. We're in a world now, it's so easy to DM a guy, but I really do think it's beneficial to the student athletes to go through our office for interviews. I will say 99% of the interviews, they're on the up and up. We will absolutely do whatever you need, whenever you need it. But we just want to be able to protect our guys. And I just want to know when our guys are doing stuff so I can promote it too. I will give you a retweet. You interview our guys. It helps us. I love cross promotion. So if I can help you, then we got a good working relationship.
Brian Reinhardt, the host of the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast, popping your peas into your microphone. That'll treat you good mic technique. Brian, appreciate you guys in the Pack being on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. And throw it to you. Final thoughts.
Well, I have to joke. It's the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast with Pat Popolizio. So there are even more peas that you did not get to. But I want to appreciate you, Jason. Appreciate the time. I kept looking at the time. I was nervous. After 5 minutes, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. So your great interview skills got me to 30 minutes. Appreciate you putting this together. Always appreciate all your help. I can't tell you how many times I've texted you just with a random stupid question, and you're very nice giving me your time and helping us with our podcast. So we're going to continue to push them out, put them on the network, and have you helping us.
Oh, I was wondering, are you going to throw that many P words at me at the end of it as you followed it up with Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast with host Pat Popolizio? Anyway. We're going to stop there because I need to.
Your eyes. It was great.
I need to rehydrate after all those popping peas and plosives. That's why you need a windscreen. Yeah. But anyway, more on technique and such. Brian, thanks for coming on and appreciate what you do for the network.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good catching up with you.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Sportswear. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MattTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed and you're already listening, you love the show and you want to support this show and this network, MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.